I used to believe betrayal made noise, a slammed door, a broken plate, maybe even a shouted curse across the dinner table. But mine came as a whisper on a screen. "We changed the locks, please don't come back." That was it. 10 words from my daughter-in-law. No punctuation, no warning. Just a sentence that felt like a blade slipped between the ribs. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time, thinking maybe I'd misread it. But I hadn't. I sent one text back. "Why?" No reply. David didn't call. Not even a question. Not even an "Are you okay, Dad?" I sat in the cab of my old Dodge, engine still ticking from the hospital ride home, watching the porch light of my own house flicker like it was reconsidering letting me in. My leg throbbed. Stitches still fresh. 72 hours ago, I was in a hospital gown, and now I was just locked out. I stepped out anyway, gripping the railing tighter than I should have. My key didn't work. The new padlock gleamed like a warning. I knocked, once, twice. I heard movement inside, a faint shuffle. Someone was home. "David," my voice was hoarse. "It's me. I just need to come in for a minute." "Nothing." I leaned close to the window and saw the boxes. My boxes, stacked by the front door like trash on collection day. My old coat, the framed photo of me and David fishing in Lake Champlain, even the worn red toolbox my father gave me, all packed like a stranger's things. I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. The porch light clicked off. I walked back to my truck, knees aching more than usual. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. Just sat there with the door cracked open and the hospital band still around my wrist. I parked overnight behind the diner off Route 9. The waitress there always refilled my coffee without asking. I didn't have the strength to explain what happened. I don't think I could have. That text glowed on my screen all night. I read it more times than I'll admit. "Please don't come back." As if I were some burden. As if I hadn't helped pay that down payment. As if I hadn't rebuilt their kitchen with my own hands after that burst pipe last winter. As if I hadn't raised that boy after his mother died with every ounce of fight I had left. If anyone's listening, don't make the mistake I did. Don't give everything and expect loyalty in return. Don't assume blood protects you from being forgotten. I stared at the screen until sunrise. No new messages. Just the one. The one that made sure I understood I had no home. Only memory. Only regret. And a quiet fury I didn't know I still had. The worst part wasn't the door that wouldn't open. It was remembering how hard I worked to build the one they locked behind me. The morning after the text, I sat in my truck, engine off, hands numb, staring at the glove box like it held a second chance. I hadn't opened it in years. Just stuffed things inside: registrations, receipts, old insurance papers, relics of a man who still thought family meant something. But under it all, folded 3 times over and clipped with a rusted paperclip, was the deed. Not to the house, that was in their names, but the land, the dirt, the foundation beneath their shiny wood floors. I remember the day I bought it. Back then, David and Melissa were barely engaged, fresh out of college, young, loud with dreams, poor in money but rich in plans. My wife had been gone 6 months. Her voice still echoed in the hallways. I needed something to keep from drowning in silence. So I sold a parcel of forest land left to me by my grandfather, land he told me to only use if it's for family. I used every dime to secure the empty plot outside town. "Build something," I told David. "Make a home." He wept when I handed him the keys. We split the process. The house deed in their name, the land held under mine, a quiet agreement. "We'll transfer it over later," I said, "when things settle." But things never do they? I cashed out part of my pension to help with construction, put my name on every invoice. Melissa smiled then, called me Dad like it was natural. She served me tea during drywall meetings, asked about Mom, pretended to listen. God, I was blind. I found the receipts in an envelope wedged between glove box manuals. My signature still sharp. Her name nowhere to be seen. The land was still mine, at least on paper. The memories came like cuts, not deep but many. David handing me a hammer, laughing when I fumbled. "Careful, old man," he said. "You break that thumb, you'll lose your coffee privileges." Or the afternoon he showed me the finished kitchen, arms wide like a boy showing off a treehouse. "You helped build this, Dad. You're always welcome." Always. Now I'm parked 2 blocks away like a trespasser. I held the deed in my lap for a long time, staring at the black ink against yellowed paper. There it was, a parcel B, registered solely under Robert Clark. Me. They may own the walls, but I still own the ground beneath them. The foundation. And maybe that was enough to start digging back. I stood by the automatic doors of the grocery store for over an hour, pretending to read a receipt I'd already thrown away. Each time those doors opened, I caught my breath. I just wanted to see my son's face. David worked Tuesdays, stocked shelves in the back near the produce. I knew his schedule. I used to drop him off here when he was 16, back when his only concern was whether his girlfriend would text back before closing shift. I texted him again that morning. "Can we talk just 5 minutes?" No response. Same as the last 3. The wind picked up around noon, and with it, Melissa's voice cut through it like glass. "You're still here." I turned. She was in workout clothes, holding a green juice, sunglasses perched like a shield. She didn't flinch. "I just want to talk to David," I said. Her lip curled. "David has his own family now." "I am his family." She stepped closer. "No, you were. Now you're just someone who makes him feel guilty." Her words didn't sting, they hollowed. "Does he even know you sent that message?" I asked. She didn't answer, just walked past me slow, like she wanted me to see she wasn't rushing, like I wasn't worth her time. I remembered holding David at 7 years old, his knee scraped from falling off his bike. He was crying, afraid he'd broken something. "Am I gonna lose my leg?" he asked. "No," I said, patting his back. "But if you don't stop crying, you might drown in your own snot." He laughed through the tears. Back then he needed me. Now I wasn't even a shadow. I went home, if you could call my truck home, and opened the folder again. The land deed stared back like a quiet friend. I needed answers. So I called Jim Mallory, an old friend from the county clerk's office. We hadn't spoken in years, but he remembered me. "I need to check on a property title," I said. "Parcel B outside Cedar Lane." He paused, then sighed. "The land still in your name, Rob. But the house, that, listed under David and Melissa Clark, bought jointly, deed transferred last year." "Transferred?" I blinked. "I thought." "You didn't transfer anything," he said. "They bought it from a development company after construction. Looks like you signed off on land use but never handed over the title." I rubbed my temples. "So technically, you still own the dirt. They built the house on your land." The silence between us stretched long. "They can't evict you from your own property," Jim added quietly. "Not if it's yours." I thanked him and hung up. So David gave me silence. But the land still spoke. And if I couldn't reach his heart, then maybe it was time to speak through the only thing he stood on. My soil. I hadn't spoken to Helen in over a year. Not since my wife's memorial, where she stood by the window the whole time, holding a glass of untouched wine like it was a promise she wasn't ready to swallow. But when I called, she answered on the second ring. "You sound tired," she said. "I am." She didn't ask anything else, just said, "I'll be there tomorrow, bring the papers." The next day she found me parked behind the diner, same spot as always. She didn't knock, didn't pause, just opened the passenger door, slid in, and handed me a thermos. "Still drink chamomile?" she asked. I nodded, unsure whether to smile or cry. She sipped her own cup in silence before glancing at the mess of documents spread across the dash. The deed, the receipts, the printout from the county office. She took one look and her entire face changed. "You still own the land?" she asked, eyes scanning every page. "You never transferred it." "No," I said quietly. "David asked. I told him someday, not yet." She shook her head slowly. "Then that house is sitting on something it doesn't belong to, which makes them squatters, entitled ones." "It's my son," I whispered. Helen turned to me, sharp but not unkind. "And yet here you are, sleeping in a truck while he eats dinner in your kitchen." Her words stung, not because they were cruel but because they were true. "I raised him better than this." "No," she said. "You raised him with love, and sometimes love makes us blind. That's not your failure, that's his." We sat in that stillness for a while, the kind of silence only two people with shared grief can hold. She finally broke it. "We can file a motion, reclaim possession, or force a lease. Legally, you're within your rights, but I won't do it unless you're sure." I stared at the paper she placed in front of me, a draft of the claim. "If I do this," I started. She finished for me. "It becomes real." "It's my son," I repeated. Helen's voice softened, but her eyes stayed firm. "Then maybe this is what it takes for him to remember that." My hand hovered over the pen. I thought of David as a child, how he used to call me Pop when no one else was around, how he'd sit on my shoulders to hang the Christmas lights. Then I remembered the lock on the door, the message on my phone, the silence. I signed. The pen didn't tremble, not even once. Helen nodded. "Good, then let's show them what they're standing on." She folded the papers neatly, placed them back in her leather case, and left the thermos on my dashboard. It still smelled like chamomile, but now it tasted like resolve. I'd driven past the house 5 times before I parked. It looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe that's what betrayal does, it shrinks the things you once built with love. Helen sat beside me in the passenger seat, calm as stone. She held the envelope like it was a hammer. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded once. My stomach was tight, but my hands didn't shake. We walked up together. The porch creaked under my boots, same as always. I used to fix that board every spring. Guess they didn't bother. Helen unfolded the notice and nailed it to the wood just left of the doorframe, firm, deliberate, final. It fluttered once in the breeze, then stilled. The front door swung open. Melissa leaned against the doorway with that same smug smile she wore at the grocery store. She didn't even blink as her eyes scanned the paper. "You think a piece of paper scares me," she said, almost laughing. "You're pathetic." She turned to David, who stood behind her like a ghost. "Tell him, David." He didn't move. My eyes met his. He looked down. Just like that, something inside me cracked. Not with rage, with grief. The kind that crawls into your lungs and sits there heavy. "You could have just asked for help," I said, voice low. "I would have done anything for you. You didn't have to lie." Still nothing, not a word. His hands were in his pockets, eyes glued to the floor like a boy caught cheating on a test. Melissa rolled her eyes. "This land nonsense won't hold up. No judge is going to evict a grieving widow and her husband from their own home." "It's not your home," Helen said coldly. "It's a structure on someone else's land." "You'll lose," Melissa snapped. Helen smiled. "Then you've got nothing to worry about." We turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I was one breath away from breaking. That night, Helen forwarded me an email from their lawyer. Subject: Ray, notice to vacate. Body: your client's claim is baseless and frankly vindictive. If this continues, we will pursue action for harassment, defamation, and emotional distress. Consider this your only warning. I read it twice. Helen leaned back in her chair and sipped her tea like it was a victory toast. "They're nervous," she said. "You can tell that from that mess," I asked. "Oh, absolutely. Threats come from fear. Arrogance is a costume, but panic," she tapped the screen. "That always leaks through." I sat there for a while, staring out the window. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. That was the part I kept replaying. Not her laughter. Not the threats. Just the way my son disappeared behind his silence. But now the land was speaking for me. And it had just nailed its first word. The orange surveyor flags flapped in the wind like little warnings. One by one, the stakes were driven into the ground, bright plastic markers stabbing into soil I once called sacred. Helen stood beside me, arms crossed. The hired surveyor moved with calm precision, measuring tape extended, clipboard tucked under one arm. He didn't need to say much, the math did all the talking. Melissa watched from the kitchen window. Her eyes tracked each flag like they were landmines. She didn't come outside, not once. "She's starting to realize," Helen muttered. I didn't answer. My boots sank slightly into the earth, soft from last night's rain. I remembered digging this yard with David. We'd spent a whole summer trenching for the water line and arguing over where to place the fence. "You're off by half a foot, Pop," he'd said, grinning like a kid who thought he was smarter than his old man. "I'm off because you hold the level like a drunk squirrel," I shot back. We laughed so hard I dropped the post-hole digger. Now that fence, the one we never quite finished, had become the line between truth and theft. The surveyor called Helen over to sign something. I stayed where I was. The final stake was placed right in front of the porch. The house sat entirely within my land's border, not a corner over, not a nail. Helen returned and handed me a folded document. "Formal lease termination," she said. "This gives them 30 days to vacate or face legal removal." I took the paper but didn't open it yet. "It's not revenge," she added, softer now. "It's correction." I nodded, though my chest felt heavier than it had in weeks. I remembered every late night I'd stood on this property after my wife passed, just breathing through the ache. How David would come outside sometimes, sit beside me on the steps without saying a word, just sipping tea from a chipped mug. Now I was evicting that silence. That night I returned to the same edge of the yard. The wind had died down. The air smelled like pine and cut grass. The porch light was off. The house was dark. I pulled the folded paper from my coat pocket, ran my fingers along the seam. My name printed at the top, their deadline stamped below. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired, but clear. I loved them. God help me, I did. But I love myself now too. And if that love costs me comfort, so be it. If it costs me their forgiveness, then that's the price I pay for remembering my worth. I tucked the paper back into my pocket and turned away. The flags rustled behind me. Tiny boundaries. Bright and unapologetic. The courtroom smelled like paper and old wood, a place where truth didn't shout, it waited. I sat still in my chair, suit one size too big since the weight dropped after the hospital. Helen sat beside me, calm as ever, flipping through the folder like it contained recipes instead of the reason I'd been sleeping in a truck. Melissa entered late. Heels sharp, eyes sharper. She wore grief like a costume, black dress, polished hair, a carefully practiced tremble in her voice. David followed behind her, eyes lowered, hands stuffed in his pockets like a boy dragged to detention. The bailiff called order. The judge adjusted his glasses. Helen stood first. "Your Honor, my client is the legal owner of the land located at Parcel B. Attached is the original title deed, tax records, and documentation of a lease termination served to the occupants. We also submit photographic evidence of the surveyor's report confirming the residential structure sits entirely on my client's property. No rent has been paid. No permission given. Therefore, the occupants are unlawfully residing on land they do not own." Her voice was steady, factual, no anger, just clean lines. Melissa rose next, all fire and fiction. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He gave us that land. He said it was for family, for David. And now he's turning on his own son, treating us like criminals. Is this what family looks like now? Legal traps and courtroom threats." The judge didn't blink. "Do you have a signed land transfer?" "No," she admitted, "but we lived there, we built that home." Helen stood again. "And now they live on it without paying a dime. My client has slept in his truck for nearly 2 months while his land has been occupied against his will." Melissa scoffed. "Oh, please," he chose to leave. Then the judge turned to David. He hadn't said a word the entire time. "Mr. Clark," the judge said, "did you know your father still owned the land when you and your wife purchased or built the house?" David shifted in his seat. His knuckles went white. The room waited. "Yes," he mumbled, barely above a whisper. Silence fell like a curtain. The judge nodded once, wrote something down, and spoke into the microphone. "This court rules in favor of Mr. Robert Clark. The defendants have 30 days to vacate the premises or enter negotiations to purchase the land at fair market value. Case closed." The gavel hit the wood with a dull thud. Helen let out a breath. "I didn't move." Melissa turned to David, furious. "Why did you say that?" she hissed. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. But I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Slow. Steady. Free. They didn't move. Not right away. Despite the ruling, despite the deadline stamped in court ink, they carried on like nothing had happened. Curtains still drawn at night. Porch lights still flickering. Melissa still walking that yappy dog around the block with her chin held high. But I saw the shift, not in action but in noise. She started posting online. Not direct attacks, just vague, bitter little poems disguised as grief. Imagine losing your home to a man who used to tuck you in. Blood means nothing when greed enters the room. Some people only love you when they control you. The words weren't mine, but they carried my shadow. David didn't post anything, didn't reply, didn't even like her rants. His silence stretched longer than the street they lived on. A week passed, then 2. On the 15th day, I drove past once just to see. A for sale sign had been planted in the lawn, white wood, red letters, bold and loud. Melissa's name was listed as the contact agent. Realtor license still active, I guess. They weren't going to buy the land. They were going to cut loose and sell the shell on top of it. The house I'd helped build with my bare hands. I didn't stop the truck, just slowed. That's when I saw him. My grandson. 7 years old, sitting on the steps, chin on his knees, a juice box in one hand and a plastic dinosaur in the other. He looked up, saw me through the windshield, and waved. A small, honest wave, nothing bitter in it. No understanding of what stood between us, just instinct, connection, maybe even love. I lifted my hand and waved back. He smiled, then went back to smashing the dinosaur into his knee, lost in whatever world children retreat to when adults mess everything up. I kept driving. My chest burned the rest of the day, not from anger, not even from grief. From restraint. Because everything in me wanted to pull over, kneel beside him and say, "I'm not the villain she painted. I'm your grandfather. I built that swing. I taught your father how to fix a leaky faucet. I carried this family before it knew how to stand." But I didn't. I let the ache sit where it needed to. Because I refused to pass this bitterness down like a family recipe. He doesn't need to inherit my wounds. He needs space to grow without picking sides. Let Melissa rant. Let David vanish behind her. Let the walls they built fall silent. I've already spoken my piece. in courtrooms, in paperwork, in silence. And now even the land agrees. Soon they'll be gone. But that little wave, that stays with me. Untouched. Unbroken. The conference room smelled like lemon cleaner and nervous sweat, the scent of paperwork and endings. I sat at the far end of the table, legal pad in front of me, hands folded, calm on the outside but still tight in the chest. A young couple sat across from me, maybe early 30s, both teachers, polite, soft-spoken. The woman had kind eyes. The man kept glancing at the backyard through the window. "We love the swing," she said gently. "Is it okay if we leave it up?" I nodded. "My grandson helped me hang the chain. It belongs to the yard now." She smiled like she understood more than I said. Melissa was absent, not even a whisper of her perfume left in the room. But David arrived 10 minutes late, hair disheveled, shirt wrinkled. He didn't meet my eyes. Just sat down, signed his name where the tabs told him to, and waited for it to be over. Helen moved through the documents swiftly, explaining each one like a conductor guiding a quiet orchestra. "This is the deed transfer. This is the termination of your temporary occupancy. This is the bill of sale for the house structure minus land value. This," she looked at me, "is your title." I reached for the final paper. My name was printed clean at the top. It felt heavier than it looked. David stood to leave. I said nothing at first, but just as he reached the door I spoke. "You still have time to be better than me." He paused, didn't turn around, didn't reply, just stood there for half a second longer than he needed to, then walked out. Helen placed the last document in front of me, signed, sealed. My hand hovered over it. "It cost me everything," I whispered. She gave me that look, not pity, not pride, just clarity. "And yet you still have yourself." I signed. The room felt different afterward. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was earned. The young couple shook my hand, thanked me for trusting them. I told them I hoped their family made better use of the place than mine did. The man nodded. "We'll take care of it." On my way out, I passed by the swing set. It swayed gently in the breeze, creaking like it remembered things. The chains were rusted, but the seat still held. I touched the wood. My grandson's tiny fingerprints once smudged this beam. The house was theirs now, but the soil beneath it, the pain, the growth, the dignity I reclaimed, that was mine. A life rebuilt. From betrayal. From dirt. From silence. The cottage sits at the far edge of the land. Modest, quiet, just enough space for one man, one bed, and the memories that refuse to leave. Helen helped me draw up the plans, said it was fitting I build something new on the same soil that tried to bury me. The wood smells fresh. The floors still creak in places, but not like the old house. These creaks feel earned, honest. I open the windows every morning to let the breeze in. No locks changed, no messages unanswered. The young couple stops by sometimes, checking in with smiles and fresh tomatoes from their little garden. They call me Mr. Clark, even though I told them to use my first name. "Thank you for letting us keep the swing," the husband said once, eyes sincere. "It belongs to the tree," I told him, "not me." They let me walk the yard whenever I want. No judgment, no tension, just kindness, the quiet kind that doesn't ask questions it already knows the answer to. I pass the oak tree almost daily. It's still strong, its branches thicker than ever, roots dug deep like they know this land has been fought for. I planted it with David when he was a boy, back when he thought I could fix anything with my hands and a hammer. Today, there was something at its base. An envelope folded with care, tucked between two rocks like a secret. I knelt down slowly, knees older than they used to be, and opened it. Inside was a drawing, crayon lines bright and clumsy, 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all of them smiling. In the background, a tree swing, crooked and proud. Scrawled at the top in big, crooked letters. Me, Grandpa, and the swing. No one told him to draw that. No one coached it. No one needed to. I traced my finger along the paper like it might disappear if I blinked too long. I don't know how he got it there. Maybe David brought him. Maybe he came on his own. Maybe the new couple saw him and didn't stop him. None of that matters. I framed it that same afternoon, hung it in the hallway above my mother's old clock. It ticks slower now, but it still keeps time. Some roots rot. Others get torn up by people who forget how deep they run. But sometimes, the ones you thought were broken grow back stronger. They reach sideways, around obstacles, toward light. My story didn't end with betrayal. It ended with land, with truth, and with a child's drawing beneath an old oak tree that still remembers my hands. Not everything I built was lost. Some things, the right things, they stayed.